Welcome to Influencers. Everyone that we speak to is making a difference in the worlds of cycling and micromobility. Some are unsung heroes, others are very well known. Today's guest is in the unsung heroes category. Warren Salomon has a lifetime of achievements across a wide range of areas. Well, Warren, thank you very much for joining me on the Influencers.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning, as they say.
Yeah,
I believe you grew up in Brisbane.
that's right.
Tell us when you first discovered the bicycle.
Well, I think my first bike was, I think I got a Christmas present when I was about 11, and it was a 24-inch Melbourne Star, a green Melbourne Star, I should say, because green was my favourite colour. And it was, I was very privileged to grow up on the outskirts of Brisbane. So this was like a suburb, but it was more like a little country town. And so the bike was just this fantastic sense of freedom.
Now, most Australians of your age, maybe not most, but certainly a lot, grew up on a Malvern Star. That wasn't uncommon, but a lot of them stopped when they turned 16 and got their driver's license.
That's true.
But you kept going. So.
Well, I'm a bit of an aberration in that regard because I've only ever owned one car in my life. The beauty of the bicycle is that you're exposed to the elements, you're out there. All right, if it rains, you really are exposed to the elements big time, but you do get to see things and you do get to see more. And I realised actually, particularly early days of bike touring, you were in touch with the land and the formations of the earth. One of the things that attracted me to Sydney when I moved to Sydney in 1975 was the inner city and how I could live, because in Brisbane, it's a big spread out suburban city. There's no inner city in Brisbane, it's just all suburbia really. And so the distances are long. Canberra's a bit like that too. And so here I am in Sydney, in the centre of Sydney, in Chippendale is where I first lived. And I lived, when I started the work with the printing business, it was probably, I could have walked there, but I could cycle much easier and quicker. I'm not one for status or anything like that. Most people would say, you know, it's...
Aren't you? I just have to pick myself up off the floor.
So, you know, it's you don't need this big object to sort of say who I am. I suddenly realised that you could live like this, that it was, and it was a much better way to live like this. And I still think it's that way. So, you know, it's very much a lifestyle choice, and it's a pity in a way that people can't make those choices or feel that they can't make those choices, because I made some conscious choices in my life, particularly the one about living close to where I work. But a lot of time people feel they can't make those choices. And so that's difficult. And I really feel sorry for young people today with the house prices, because you know, that's a really determining factor.
I want to focus on a few huge achievements in your life, because you really have achieved some pretty amazing milestones. So the first one I want to talk about is that you founded what I believe is the first ever national non-racing cycling magazine in Australia.
And there was no magazine around to really dealing with non-competitive cycling at all. There was National Cycling, which was a racing cycling, the forerunner of your magazine, of Bicycling Australia. And I thought, well, it would really be good to sort of help promote this and get it going. That's how we got freewheeling started. And freewheeling was, we printed it in, or I printed it in the end of 1977, and its first issue came out January 1977, 78. And a number of people that were then involved in the bicycle scene contributed articles, and it went on sale. And then from then on, I published the magazine. The magazine developed as your magazine would have, because the market started to develop. But I am kind of proud in a way that a lot of the things that happened during the 10 years that I published Freewheeling chronicled a lot of the important changes that were happening. So, like, for example, the first ever bike plan in Australia, which was the Geelong bike plan in 1979, that was chronicled in, I think, issue 8 of the magazine, and also the start of mountain biking. The very first ever Australian national championships of mountain biking happened in Sofala, I think in 1984 or something like that. I can't remember the date entirely. And then also the arrival of index gears, would you believe? I mean, we all take things like that for granted these days, but, you know, a very good racing bike in those days wouldn't have had index gears. And I like to tell the story that when I started the magazine, the best bike that was in the catalogue of one of my advertisers was this absolutely revolting purple bike. I mean, the colour purple, the bike was okay, but the colour purple, and it had steel rims. So that was the top of the market in those days. So now, today, and we're surrounded by amazing carbon fibre. You couldn't buy carbon fibre. In the 10 years I sold the magazine to a publishing company in 1989, and at that stage, carbon was just starting to look like it might be affordable, but before then, you know, for love or money, maybe even the top racer, it still was a lot of big expense. But now it's all production stuff and index gears, electric gears, e-bikes, for example. I didn't really see the start of that, but, you know, that was what was happening. So it's a really, I feel kind of privileged in a way to have been through that period.
Another thing that I didn't realise, that you're actually the co-founder of quite a pioneering bicycle shop as well. That was quite different to the shops of its day.
That's right, Inner City Cycles. And it was, that was another thing. I had a friend of mine, Dave McLean, he runs a nice little second-hand bookshop now he's retired up in Newcastle. And Dave was running a small bike shop, more of a repair shop, the kind of thing you get now, but you didn't get then, in a garage in Annandale. And we were great mates. And he said he was looking at maybe expanding the business. And I said, well, yeah, why don't we start a bike shop together? And there was nothing in Glebe. And Glebe was really very much the inner west in those days. And you know, there was a lot of alternative stuff happening then, and we thought, well, you know, that's certainly where it'd be a good market. But let's, you know, and with my interest in touring and that, I thought, well, let's make it a kind of a specialist touring shop as well as, you know, we're not going to be catering for the road races. We're more going to be catering for the purely recreational market. Because at that time in Sydney, there were a lot of bike shops out in the suburbs that were established by named bike racers. You know, they used to say when a bike racer retires from cycling, they set up a bike shop. It's a bit like, you know, to get a cheap source for their habit, you know. and so we thought, well, let's do that. So that was just before 1980. And I did that for 2 years, and the reason I got out of it was simply because I was still doing freewheeling at that stage. I'd sold the printing business, and I had the room upstairs. Was my share of the rent, apart from the bike shop, and 2 days a week I would work with others up there, part-time staff, volunteers, to put freewheeling together. And I wouldn't say running two businesses at the one time tore me apart, but it almost did, I felt, you know. Yeah. And there was a part where I sort of thought, I'm not really feeling very good. Life is not, I'm not happy, sort of thing. And I realised that I had to make a choice. And the choice I made was to do the magazine full time, because the bike shop would continue, and it has continued. It's still there.
You're a great starter of things,
Yeah.
which, to your credit, are still going to this day in
Yeah,
most
yeah.
cases, and bigger and stronger than ever.
That's good. Yeah.
So let's roll on to the third, if you like, which I would consider a major achievement. And you've already touched on it briefly, which was the Bicycle Institute, later to become Bicycle New South Wales. So, and I know you've had a couple of episodes of deep involvement in that.
Well, yes, I've been in and out of that organisation a lot, and I've joked to someone that I've filled just about every position in the organisation. I've been on the board many times. And in 1993 I became the chief executive. Just to finish that little thread, I had to make the decision about what I needed to put my energy in. If I left the magazine at that stage, it probably would have folded. So I had to do it, and I had to professionalise it, because basically, if I'm kind of a great believer in, if you're going to do something and it's going to work properly, you've got to pay people to do things, because you can't do it on your own. And if you want to do it more than just do it on your own, you've got to pay people to do it, and you've got to reward them, not just financially, but you also got to support them for what they do for the business. So then I got an office in the cheaper part of the city and ran the magazine from there. And along the way, I started another thing. So the Bicycle Institute, I was, during those years, I was involved in the events and things like that, and also in the committee and everything like that. But there was a period where I wasn't that involved because I was doing other things. But in 1982, a friend of mine came back from Europe on a bit of a holiday and was raving about this wonderful event that he went on called the London to Brighton Bike Ride. And he's an old touring mate of mine, Nigel Jenkins, and he lives in Melbourne now. And so we got talking. We thought, that's a fantastic event, you know. Why don't we do something like this? I said the magazine would support it, because all of our readers would love to come on a ride like that, because, you know, this is the ultimate in bicycle touring in an urban setting. So we took a look around, and I always joke and say that the route, we didn't find the route found us, because it was 92 kilometres was the London to Brighton ride. It was a city to a city, or a town to a town. So we started to look around, and Sydney, because it's kind of landlocked by all of this wonderful bush and everything like that, we could either go to Newcastle, too far, or we could go to Wollongong. And when we measured the distance, we almost fell off our chairs, because it's the same distance basically. But what a route, because it was absolutely spectacular. And I remember the first ride we did with some of our kids and woman that worked for me at the time, her son and my son and our partners, and we rode down there, and we stood down at that Stanwell Tops lookout, and we just went, wow, you know, this is going to be good. And so in 1982 we had about modest 250 riders. They had I think the Deputy Mayor of Sydney launched the event, and those 250 riders set off to the 92 kilometres to Wollongong, and they had morning tea at Audley, and they rode on Lady Carrington Drive, which in those days was you could drive through, but now it's, you know, just off sealed to traffic and only bicycles and walkers. So, and then we did the rest, and then we brought everybody back on the trains. We brought the bicycles back on the train. We organised it. Everyone got a ticket with the State Rail at the time, and they got back to Sydney. So that was kind of, you know, that event now, you just started things. Well, that event now, they say the MS Society, I gave the MS Society that event after I'd sold the magazine. But that event now nets the MS Society, or supports the MS Society. It's one of their major fundraising events. I think at least $2 million a year they raise from that event.
I think we should say here that it didn't have 250 riders by the time you gave the event to MS. How many did it have?
We had some big jumps in the first year that the MS Society was involved. The event was up to around 5,000, and I think by the time I gave the event, donated the event to the MS Society, it was getting towards 8, 9, 10. It was round about. The event has been capped at 10 simply because of the management of it and the road. And in fact, probably if the MS Society tried to start an event like that on that route today, the police and the traffic authority would say, no, we're not going to let you.
So I think it has to be said, and people watching this would probably be wondering, an event with 10,000 riders that can raise $2-3 million a year, which I know independently that, yes, that's what they say it raises. That is on a spectacular route that you couldn't probably get approval as a startup to do now, only because it's been going for decades. That is a really valuable asset.
Oh, yeah.
Why did you give it to them and not sell it on the market and make a lot of money?
Well, probably need to go back a little bit, because when I sold the magazine, I had an offer from one of my top advertisers at the time, Martin Hanley, who ran Hanley Trading. It was one of the I don't think Hanley Trading. Anyone who's been in the bike trade a number of years will know Hanley Trading. They used to be Sun Tour. They used to distribute Mavic, a whole lot of important brands. That's right. And so he offered me a job as marketing manager, and I did that for a year, but I wasn't really interested so much in the marketing side of it. The Gong Ride was still running at that time, and the MS Society was running the event. But because I'd given them the event, they decided that they'd better do something serious about it and be serious about running this event, because they realised that it was an asset. Mind you, when I gave them the event, I think I said 8, 9, it was more like 8,000, and the event at that stage hadn't reached the kind of fundraising input that it has later on. But they could see the future. And so Ken Lewis, the marketing manager of MS, said to me, well, we think we've got to do something about this. It's a fabulous event. We're going to set up an outdoor events department, fully staffed, and we're going to run this properly. And I said, who do you think you might get to run that? And he said, we'll advertise for it. And I said, well, if you're interested, keep me in mind, I'd be interested. He said, I thought you were happy where you were. And I said, no, I think I'd be very happy to do something like this on a professional level. When I left the event to the MS Society after I moved on from running outdoor events at MS Society, the event we ran that year, we had a staff of about 500 trained volunteers that year, mainly because the previous year we had some issues with the route management that in order to satisfy the police and the road authority, we had to really throw everything at it. So, it's a lot of people.
Are you saying you don't have 500 friends, Warren, who'll get up at 4 a.m?
That's right. Yeah.
It must be
get
very,
up on a Sunday morning.
It must be very antisocial, I think.
So it was, it was a great opportunity, and so working for MS taught me a lot, because it taught me about. I was new to the fundraising industry in a sense. I didn't know what MS was really. When they started their involvement, I certainly learned, but when you work for an organisation, you actually see the services they do for their clients. You really, it's a different thing entirely.
So, getting the chronology right, was it from MS as the events director that you moved to Bicycle New South Wales as the executive officer, chief executive officer?
I was with MS for about 3.5 years. I seemed to do things in chunks of 3, but also this thing of I'm good at starting things, but I wouldn't say I get bored. I don't get bored at all, but my forte is not building things from that second stage sort of thing. That's where you need somebody who's maybe a much better business person than I am, someone who can really manage larger organisations than I am. But in those days, for what I was doing, it worked.
You're a pioneer. And
Sort of like
you grew Bicycle New South Wales from a very small organisation to a very large, successful one. So I'd like you to
Well, at the
tell me a
time,
little bit about that.
I was on the committee,
Yeah.
and the organisation had just employed. It had taken over. Bicycle Victoria came up to New South Wales. Bicycle Victoria was running these 9-day events, the Great Victorian Bike Ride, which still runs. And in those days, they were starting to get big numbers, and they started to increase their program. So they came up to New South Wales and they said, "Hey, Bicycle New South Wales, we'd like you to be involved and help you start a New South Wales version of this." They were doing rides in Tasmania, and also every second year they do one in Tasmania and then one in New Zealand even. And really kind of amazing stuff what they were doing. And you're getting thousands of people on these rides. And so I was on the committee. I was also working for MS. So they also wanted MS involved as a charity. So we started the Great New South Wales Bike Ride, which ran in 1991 from Mudgee to Sydney, and got about 800 people, and it was a great success. And I was the route manager on that ride. Also, I was the MS person on that ride as well, and all the MS staff who worked for me for MS filled professional positions on the ride. And then the following year, the biggest ever New South Wales bike ride from Kosciuszko to Sydney had about 1,500 people on it. It was a big jump. I was the publicity manager, and my operations manager was the event director, sort of thing, for the ride. So at that point, the Bicycle New South Wales, and I was on the committee at the time, decided that we would like to take this on ourselves and say, "Thanks very much, Bicycle Victoria, we really appreciate your help, but we really think we could do this ourselves from now on in." And so in 1993, the third event, Port Macquarie to Sydney, we employed an event director, Leonie Watman, and then set off. But unfortunately, at that point, the general manager of the time for Bicycle New South Wales left for various reasons, personal reasons, work and stuff like that. He actually went to a better job. Because that's one of the things about community groups. You know, the pay is not wonderful. No. And actually, I thought, this is an opportunity to run an organisation of which I've spent a lot of my time in and out of, and I'm very much interested in its cause, and I would like to see it really grow at this critical point, because the events thing I saw as really an important way of growing the organisation. So I took a massive cut in pay at MS and took up a position as executive director or CEO of Bicycle New South Wales. It was Bicycle Institute New South Wales. We changed a few things. We moved to an office in the city. We grew a number of events. The big New South Wales bike ride went from strength to strength. We upped the numbers on the one-day ride. We started to do advocacy. We employed an advocacy officer.
Give us an idea, if you don't mind, in terms of measurements of members when you started to when you left a few years later, that role, or number of staff when you started to when you finished there?
Yeah, well, I think the staff when I left at about 5, and when I left it was around about close to 11, and there were other part-timers as well. But we also had this volunteer program that was really important, because we would get people coming in and helping us work in the office, on the events, and work on other parts of the organisation. So, because the thing about a community organisation, you can do that. It's very difficult when you're running a for-profit organisation to convince people that you've got no cause, and people will work for a cause and they'll volunteer for a cause. So, we had a lot of wonderful people that actually came and helped. So there were, it was quite a big office we had in the city in a building in Castlereagh Street, which was directly across from the Ministry of Transport, which is where we really wanted to be. We wanted to be a player, basically.
And I know it was very tough. It's tough today, but it was perhaps even tougher back then to get political wins and wins on the ground for cycling. Yeah. But if you had to name one or two of your best wins in that era, what would you like to?
Well, the one I think that I'm most proud of is the free bicycle travel on trains in New South Wales, and that came about simply because we took a stand. Bicycle groups run election campaigns at election time. And generally what happens is they survey the parties, they then tell their members what is on offer, and they say, you make a decision. But we said, no, this is a critical moment for us, and we want to get the best offer. And we actually, the Liberal Party had been in for a number of years, and Bruce Baird, actually, Mike Baird's father, was the Minister for Transport, Roads and Transport. And when we went to the government and said, show us your policy, they gave us a little blue booklet that the RTA, the Roads and Traffic Authority at the time, published, which was all of their wonderful things about cycling, and it really wasn't much at all. It was pretty, small stuff. And we said, no. We want your policy, the Liberal Party policy. What's your policy? And they said, no, we're the government, that's our policy. Now, anyone who knows the way the political system works is that's not the way to approach anything, really. At an election, you're really putting your pitch to the community. You're saying, this is why you need to vote for us. If we said, well, we're not really happy with what the government has done, that's okay, Liberal Party. You tell us now what you want to do. And so, it was very disappointing. And so we went to the Labor Party and they said, well, what do you want? And so we listed a whole lot of things we wanted.
Right.
And one of those was free travel on bicycle, because at the time you had to pay a child's fare to take your bicycle on a train. And it wasn't as if bicycles were going to clog up the train system. It just wasn't happening. But it was really a damn inconvenience for you to actually take your bike. Sure, if you went to the country or something like that, you had to pay a fee, as you still do. But suburban travel, it should be able to help you to get to work, to use the bike as a mode share type arrangement. So we put out a campaign. We did a campaign. We call it a message in a bottle. The pitch to the media was a bicycle bidon, water bottle with our press release inside it. And we gave everyone in the media one of those, and we held a press conference, and we said, this is who we think our members and the citizens, the bike riding citizens of New South Wales, should vote for.
So I'd like to finish with one other thing that you've pioneered, and to the best of my knowledge, you were possibly the first to set up a professional specialist cycling consultancy business. Mm-hmm. So just tell us a little bit about that, which is...
Yeah, well, that's another thing that you could say. I could start it, but at the end of... When I left Bicycle New South Wales, I think people have said, well, why did you leave Bicycle New South Wales? Basically, I think when you're working at white-hot fever pitch for 3.5 years, I was pretty close to being burnt out. I was, these things happen in community groups. And I was very happy with the organisation as I left it, and it certainly went on from strength to strength. And but I wanted to do other things as well. And I'd been on government committees. I was a member of the, I was president of the Bicycle Federation during my time, which is the amalgamation of the cycling organisations, Bicycle Victoria, Bicycle New South Wales. For a number of years, I'd been to, for years I'd been going to the Velocity International Bicycle Conference in Europe. And I'd been on government committees. I'd been on road safety committees. I was also representative on the Australian Bicycle Council, which was actually due to my being president of the Bicycle Federation. So I'd spent a lot of my time seriously looking at this whole issue of bicycle as a transport mode. So yes, I've got my touring background and I'd always continue to be touring, but being involved in the Bicycle New South Wales, one of the things you realise in an organisation that's out there, that's seeing all these potholes and doesn't like what they're seeing and they're finding it difficult to cycle, they come at you and they say, come on, you've got to make things better. You've got to get on to the government. You've got to get them to do things. And by golly, that's, anyone who's tried to make governments do things that they don't necessarily want to do, that's a difficult thing.
So you've been running sustainable transport consultants for 24 years now, I believe.
Mm.
And what do you think some of the keys you've learnt and been able to do for Australia and the cycling community through your work as a consultant?
One of the most important things we did, myself and a colleague, a Dutch colleague called Dick van den Doel, and I were invited by the RTA at the time to
the Roads and
Traffic Authority, became Roads and Maritime Services and now Transport for New South Wales, to author a new guidelines for cycling in New South Wales. And that really came about because one of the first jobs I did for the RTA was to do a consultation, statewide consultation for a bike plan that the Labor government had actually instigated. And so the guidelines were important because there were things happening. The councils were getting funding from the government to build things. So there was things being built, and the government realised that the national guidelines weren't all that good, and we needed something in our state to really give the right direction for the practitioners to actually build the right kind of facilities that were going to be right for the cyclists. So we did that. We based a lot of it on knowledge of what we'd seen overseas and what we knew of particularly the Dutch guidelines. We were very much influenced by their guidelines, and also the Germans, and also what was happening even in the UK and the United States, although those two countries are still pretty much sort of car countries, really. It's the Europeans that understand the way it works. And just going back to what I was saying before, the important thing that I guess I added to it all was the perspective of the view from behind the handlebars rather than the view from behind the windscreen. Mm. And one of the things that the general manager of bicycles and pedestrians at RTA at the time said after we'd done the guidelines was that I want to roll out a training course that's going to teach our graduates and our practitioners all about these guidelines, because it's no sense in just dumping that out there because they won't read it, they won't understand it, and they also, probably most of them, have never ridden a bike before, so we need to do this. So in 2003 we started the training course. It's called Designing for Bicycles for Pedestrians and Bicycle Riders, and we've been running it ever since. I think, in fact, in May we've probably had about 2,000 people through it now, and we've also helped start courses in Queensland and also in the ACT. But the importance of that, Phil, is that nothing works in a vacuum sort of thing. We realise that there's a process of doing things. Infrastructure doesn't appear with a wave of a magic wand. It happens because trained people design things, and then skilled, trained people build things. And in my area, I'm quite excitedly seeing a cycleway being built through Bondi Junction at the moment that I never ever thought would happen. But now councils are doing it and the government's funding them, and it's really good. But I guess the thing is getting that perspective. We always say the training course is really important because we run practical sessions in that training course. The people come up to us after and said, you know, I really appreciate that course because you got us out there walking and on a bike, and I saw things that I really never saw before because, well, you know, I'm sitting in an office and I don't do much riding. And so, yeah, so it was kind of, you know, revelatory for them because they suddenly got it. This is why we're doing this. This is how we need to do things like this. So I guess in a way, I always say to friends, it's not rocket science. I mean, I've learned a lot. I always say my English expression has become very bureaucratese because I've hung around too much with bureaucrats and engineers now. But, you know, you've got to speak the lingo. You've got to understand how the practitioners see the world and then translate the world for the cyclist. So in a sense, I'm a kind of a middleman for getting those you know, engineers, trained people, professional people to really produce the kind of facilities that are going to work for the users.
Well, I must say that as one of the 2,000 people who've actually done that course myself, what an eye-opener it was, even for me after years of experience in the field, and even more so an eye-opener as to the low level of experience of those people surrounding me doing that course and how important it was. I can absolutely vouch for 100%. I just want to finish with one final question, and that's looking to the future. You know, where do you think we're at, and what you know, you've got an almost 50-year perspective on change, but what sort of changes do you think we might be hoping to achieve in the next years ahead?
Well, I'm the eternal optimist. I mean, in the last 50 years, you know, to come through the last 50 years, there are times when I figure you've got to be an optimist in order to sort of move forward, sort of thing. But what I've seen is when I first went to Europe and I came back to Australia, I said to some friends in the game, I said, I've seen the future, right? And the more time goes on, the more the future takes shape in the place where I live. Now, I was part of the design team that produced the Burke Street Cycleway in Surrey Hills for the City of Sydney. And we were running the training courses in 2003. There was nothing like that there. And then now that's there. And every time we go and visit that facility as part of the training course, more and more people we see riding. So in a way, the future has landed in Sydney. But one of the things, I guess, that really needs to change, and it is changing, and that's the exciting thing, you can sense it, is that particularly after all the COVID thing has changed, it's a really a very much a life-changing event for a lot of people and for the culture as such, because it's made us think about the way we do things. And the way we do things is not necessarily the way we've done things in the past. We can do things differently. And work, for example, working at home. Who would have thought that was possible? But now it's been proven it does work, sort of thing. Also with cycling. Cycling does work, and all these pop-ups and all of these people buying bikes in bike shops and everything have proven that actually, if you've got people coming in, buying bikes, getting out and actually riding the bikes, then you've got a whole game changer happening here. So I think actually, we're in a really exciting situation at the moment. I think it's, I think the years ahead are going to be very interesting and very, very, from a cycling perspective, very enjoyable.
I hope so too. Warren Salomon, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Phil. Appreciate it. Pleasure.